Hey, we're live. How's it going? As always, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time for another RCS Live. And today we're talking about Zetta, specifically custom asset types and custom fields. Because remember, Zetta is so flexible, we really want to cater this to your workflows. We have a lot of different ways that users incorporate these custom asset types and custom fields. So hopefully today, once you see one of these tips and tricks, you'll be like, oh, I can just create some custom fields. Yeah, that's the whole point, right? Catering Zetta to your workflow. So pretty excited for today. Couple housekeeping things to get out of the way. Don't forget, as always, we're looking for beta users. We got Zetta 5.22.1 and G Selector 5.1. If you want to get your hands on the latest RCS scheduling techniques, Zetta features, and so much more, you can check that out. Treat your local RCS contact. Could be me, could be somebody in support. Don't worry, we'll put you in the right hands there and take care of you to become a RCS beta user. Let's see here. As always, we have our archive. I love it when I get users emailing me and said, hey, I looked at this video and I loved it. I'm looking for something else. So as always, if you have any questions, you can always email me. My email here is just nmumford@rcsworks.com, or you can chat as well here. I do have, let's see here. Ooh, what? See, STL. Is that St. Louis, Mark, or is that somewhere else? Thanks for checking in, Mark. As you can see, he's checking in from YouTube. We're live, let's see, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter Live. If we're missing your social medium, just let me know, and we'll add that to our broadcast live list as well. Don't forget to check your backup path, send your data exchanges as well. Just a little friendly reminder to make sure you have all your latest backups in there and all of that good stuff, right? So let's see here. What else do we got here? St. Louis. It is St. Louis. Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for checking in. I love this. Thank you, Anthony. Checking in from my garage. Hey, listen, hopefully your garage is heated, right? That'd be great. We'll call it, garage equals, nice man cave. How's that, Anthony? Let's see here. Careers at rcsworks.com. We're always hiring some rare positions as well. So if you're curious about that, check that out. Email your studio setup. Maybe Anthony's got a nice garage radio station going on. You can email marketing@rcsworks.com. It will feature you in our hashtag studio spotlight. And let's see here. Anything else? Always doing our thing with FTS, Field Technician Services, as well, too. So, let's dive right into it. Talk about customizing our Zetta experience. So I'm going to jump between my Zetta and very briefly my G Selector here in regards to the custom fields. So I, of course, am on the new Zetta 5.22.1, which you could be too if you want to be a beta user. And we're going to focus here on configuration and system. That's the big guy we're going to focus on today. And I'll make this kind of right in the center here so you can see it. Should make it a little bit bigger here from resolution. But what we're talking about here is custom asset types and custom fields. We'll start with custom asset types, Anthony. How's that? So if we're going to the asset types here, again, configuration, system, and you can go to asset types. You can see this right here in this window. It's very straightforward, in my opinion. You have the name of the asset type, the description, wherever you want to call it, and of course, the type. There's some things in here, obviously, like, for example, songs. Songs are songs. We can't change that per se, so that's a system type. Whereas you can see here, I have some kind of custom options here as well. In addition to that, you might remember we have the server side versus the client side search. That is this guy over here. As you can see, there's an option here to toggle between the two, as well as an option to switch method or search method switchable. We just have some users that want, maintain the performance and don't want their users toggling between both. Others, like me, I like the flexibility. And so the idea is you have this little guy down here, this little gear, where I can search between server side and server side. Classic example there is I can go over here, type Beyonce, something like that. Or I can jump over here to the client side search, and I can always sort these columns A to Z, but use the filter up here to type in Beyonce, something like that, right? That's all we're doing there. And then, of course, that's checkbox for switchable. We have the asset totals that are there. So again, name, description, the type, system, or custom. We're kind of working on the custom side of things right here, right? And it depends on the assets you have, right? The server side search is typically kind of think it as like, a big, broader search of your library. There's no reason to load all those assets. So we're kind of make this very specific, right? And so the idea is that we want to essentially small number of categories or small number of assets. You could probably stick to the client side. Large library, you might want to put the server side on. Me personally, I like the option to switch back and forth, but I totally understand that you might know I want to do that too. Hey, Richard, thanks for checking in. Where are you checking in from? I appreciate it. Zetta's be awesome. You're going to love it. Trust me. Any questions, Richard, on past videos, just let me know. As always, don't forget the archive is a full list of there's some great resources. And don't forget, too, we do a written blog on every one of these because I totally am understanding that your time is precious, right? And so the idea is that some of these videos have certain topics that pertain to you. Some might not. So read up on it first, and then you can see if it works for you. And you're checking it from Montreal. Awesome. Love it, Richard. So what I have here is me personally, and you heard me say this before on these RCS lives, I like control. That's always been me from a programmer. Now, I did work for, let's say, aside from the big guys, I also worked for an independent company when I was a PD. So it really I got a little more flexibility there. So I liked isolating things. I liked having, let's say, you can see here an auto import folder. That's a lot for demo purposes for me. But best of morning show, right? Having a morning show sweeper, a sound effects section, a Nate's folder, if you will. Yeah, Richard, I can poke you. Absolutely. I saw you in there, Richard. I can poke you. And so again, you have here, again, isolating some audio. The only thing you have to note about this is make sure that in regards to integration, songs are songs, links are links, spots are spots. Spots are for Acquira, links and songs are for G Selector. If you have a custom asset type that is specific to Zetta, it's not included in the G Selector side of things because it's not a song, right? So just be aware. But if you have, let's say, a song, and we'll use you, Richard, for example. I'm going to pick on you. So let's just say Richard has a Richard song category. We'll even go as far as say Richard has its own Sunday morning jazz show or a brunch show, whatever it could be. And you have your own music that you like to pick from. You want to make sure if it's a song, it maintains inside the song custom asset type because it needs to be integrated in both. However, that doesn't mean that you can't have your own Richard attribute, right? It's a little different behavior. And again, just so these asset types here, I'm talking about, I always joke, these Charlie Brown looking like images, the Nate's jingles, the interviews, live reads, sound effects, split jingles, stingers, auto import folder, best of morning show. These are all custom asset types. And yes, you can organize these as well. You can move them around if you wanted to. You can also add a tab here. I believe it's the right click. You can add them, move them around, up, down, left, right. So there's options here, how you organize these as well. Just how you want to, kind of move them up, down, everything there too. So some options how you can organize this if you want to, or for user specific, going back to Richard's point, if you have, let's say, a Richard asset type or a morning show asset type, you might have, based on your layout, you might not include these inside your layout, right? Because you don't need it. As in, for example, Anthony might not need the Richard folder and, vice versa. So you can make those user specific if you wanted to as well. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Just add your little plus here, give it a name, give description. The type's going to be custom, define it server side or client side, the method there, and they'll show you the asset title there. And it's great. Yeah, absolutely. And so you can see here, perfect. Oh, God, you guys are great today. Let's see here. Perfect for all, best of shows, sound effects. Absolutely. So what I do, Richard, is I actually have a best of morning show, which I'm on it. That's why I can't see it. And what I do is I take my my recorder. There's a couple ways you can do this, but I'm going to use the complex method because I love making things complex. And then, of course, isolating individual workflows. We have one user, background recorder. It's recording the board feed. That board feed has an asset that's recorded outside of Zetta because we want to have an archive purpose of that asset. Once it's outside of Zetta, we save it to a specific location. That location has a corresponding auto load, brings it back into Zetta as a custom asset type, best of morning show. Once the best of morning show is here, I know it's only best of morning show, either imaging and production, and I can grab these assets, pull it right into a mini log, best of morning show, something like this. And of course, I have all my assets ready to go. I can, of course, voice track and all of that good stuff here too. I got some past videos in our archive on that. But as you can see, when you isolate these custom asset types, It just makes things a lot easier and clearer for you, right? At the end of the day. Let's see here. Anthony, are there plans to incorporate these into G Selector? Not right now, just because of the nature of the beast. G Selector is a music scheduler. Zetta is the automation system. I always say G Selector is the brains of the operation. Zetta is the brawn. So the question becomes is why would you need to include a best of morning show segment and schedule it over in G Selector? Now, if you do, then we probably encourage you to use something like the link aspect of it. That way it's integrated into G Selector and you can go from there. And by the way, there's some really cool little tips in there and tricks in regards to, there's a new feature in G Selector. I'll give you a little tidbit here, a little sneak about this. It's the linker show segments. Maybe I'll try to poke it after I show you this thing in a second. But the idea is, let's say you have, a 60-minute show with a live concert or whatever it is. You have a bunch of assets inside of it. You could essentially define the link, which is the 60-minute show, and then you include the G Selector song segments inside of that. Just a little teaser here. That's what I like to do here for my RCS Lives. I love to kind of drop little hints there and tell you what's coming down the pipeline as well. So that's the custom asset types. Let's move on to custom fields. And this is probably more of what you're talking about, Anthony, is having these types of fields included over in G Selector. Again, configuration, system, custom fields. Let's go back here for a second to Richard's point, which is Richard has a jazz brunch or some type of acoustic sunrise show on Sunday mornings, and he has special music that gears towards him, and maybe he has a special custom field. But we want to, Anthony, include that in G Selector, right? So you can see here, these are my types here. Systems are systems, customs are customs. And I have certain things here like important information, right? Now, notice what we're doing here when we define these. We give it a name. So I always just generically put important information because this is an important piece of information. It might be important to Richard, might be important to Anthony. It might be important to, let's see, Gary here or whoever's checking in on Facebook. We Mark as well, right? And so we just give it a name. Then we have the asset types. We can say it's all custom asset types. We can say song links. Looks like I duplicated that on my end. But then I have its scope, is it station or attribute? And I'm just going to go ahead here and hit a little plus, just kind of show what I'm talking about. So the name, we'll just call it RCS Live Test, right? And what's the asset type? So we can say something like, maybe we'll call it, I don't know, best of morning show for that custom asset type, right? The scope, is it station or global? Typically, we like to keep it global, but obviously, if you want to make it station specific, you totally can. And then the two types are attribute and text. Very, very simple. If it's an attribute, remember inside of Zetta, we lock that attribute. So if let's say the artist is Aerosmith, the attribute is Aerosmith, right? It's that entire value that is saved. Whereas if it's a text, we don't really save it as much as it's just a text string that's included in that field. And of course, if you do attributes, I highly encourage you to allow new values and multiple values. Of course, if you don't want to allow new values, you put the values in here. So for example, one of our clients has a special rule in for their streaming, for their RDS feed that has something like, streaming, something like that, right? And essentially there's only fields that are allowed are yes and no. And the idea is that, am I allowed to add this field? Yes. Or am I allowed to, is this value yes or no? If it's a yes, it's allowed to play over the stream. If it's a no, the RDS flags it as a this value no. The streaming provider sees that and blocks that spot from playing over the air on the online stream. That's more of a streaming settings on their end. But you can see how you can incorporate some of these custom fields for both triggers as well as just organizational purposes for, let's say, again, going back to Richard's point with his jazz show. Is there a way? Great question, Anthony. Is there a way to group or subgroup the asset types? Not necessarily. Now, I will ask you, what do you mean by grouping the sub-asset types? Because probably you're asking a question that could be done somewhere else. Just depends on how you want to group them, right? So again, if I'm under my songs here, right, I have all my songs that are here. I can sort by category and all those things. But you'll see as well, I have important information here. And so I can go and let's say, you can see I have some important information. These are certain fields and values I have for my songs. I'm important, test 1, 2, 3. I'm also important, stuff like that. So if you're asking a way to group the asset types, you can take one asset type, include a custom field. This is why I'm doing both at the same time. And then from there, you can then sort or filter by that custom asset type. All I did there, by the way, if I'm going to remove this here, I'm going to right click, do insert. I believe it's under extra. Is it extra or is it under station specific? Station specific, if I'm not mistaken. It's somewhere here. Where is it? I thought it in here in a second. Boom. Important information down there. Sorry, it is extra down the very bottom. Important information. So I can include that in there just like that. So, you're not going to, let's say, group your custom asset types. You keep the asset type specific and use the custom fields to do that subgroup, Anthony. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. And by the way, as you can see here, I have certain things like important information. I also have OUTCUE as well. This is specific towards spots. And notice I use a text string. And by the way, just in case you're going to play with this later and you're just kind of looking at what your custom fields are, make a note that some of these might be grayed out. They're grayed out because if you have a value that's existing in the custom field, it is locked in the Zetta world. So you need to change the name or whatever it is. You would have to remove those fields and then, of course, edit that custom field. Little advanced kind of topic, but just letting you know, in case you're wondering why this might be grayed out, it's because there's a field that's already saved and locked in your system. So 2 examples I have here is important information, which is an attribute, and an OUTCUE, which is just a spot and a text. Because obviously, if I have an attribute saved, there's going to be a lot of OUTCUEs. And there's no sense of having, hundreds of OUTCUEs, which are .com, this, blah, 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 whatever it could be, right? So I'm going to keep the spots OUTCUE as a text, whereas the important information, this is specific important information. You can see my values here. I can play the sweeper, test 1, 2, 3. I'm important. I'm also important. Stuff like that, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this window for a second, right? Everybody, that all makes sense? Again, configuration system. We have the asset types and the custom fields. That makes sense to everybody here? Great. I'm going to check my chat, make sure my chat's good. Matt, right? Makes sense. Khalid, makes sense. Robert. Hey, Robert, how's it going? Hey. Ajay, makes sense. Ajay, if I messed it up, I'm sorry. I apologize. Makes sense. So the idea here, perfect. Thank you. And so the idea is now we can start incorporating this. I'm not going to save my changes. I just had that one field there. And now we can incorporate these into our everyday Zetta experience, right? So I can go to something like, let's just say here, let's pick a category A, something like this. We'll pick this Save Your Tears remix. I'm going to jump to my G selector for a second. Let's see, do you want my Save My Tears? I'll go back to my browse, Save My Tears. And you notice, by the way, a nice fancy G selector. Ooh, look at this. Nice dark mode going on. I'm going to open this up and you're going to think to yourself, Nate, this looks very different than my G selector. And that's because I have a custom song link window enabled on my G selector 5.1. The purpose of this is each one of these, treat them like Zetta modules. I can include all the important information I want, organize it the way I want. So I can make this history window nice and big. If I have multi-station, I can bring it to the forefront, stuff like that. For example, I have here important information. Notice how I made the important information prominently displayed in my layout. And I could also organize this. I've been playing around with some other clients as well. Yes, exactly, Richard. Game changer. So the idea is that you can have multiple layouts here in G Selector. You can organize it the way you want. So if you have, let's say, a multi-station, programming mindset, you might have multi-station front and center. If you're like me and you care about the history, you might have the history nice and big front and center. Whereas you can move the attributes with the scalars and all that stuff. So you can really customize this. But I just kind of took a quick little profile here, and you can see there's important information. And I can say, I too am important, right? Something like that. And I can save this. And this asset, now that I changed that value, it can also be reflected over in Zetta. And it's important to note too that we have some of these little kind of dots here. There are ways now in this new G selector, if you have more of a macro workflow and you have multiple users adding assets in the system, and there are some pieces of information that are very important that are required, we can also include those here. So if I add a brand new song and I save it, if I don't have those values entered, like for example, title, artist, maybe there is an important information field that needs to be there. If you don't save it, right, then you're not going to be able to save that asset until there's a value in that field. A little cool little feature there in the brand new G selector, again, with the custom song links. And again, all I did there was it's important information. I want to add it on here. So I made it from front and center, and we'll have some videos on how to do that as well in the future. And by the way, just in case you didn't notice, OUTCUE and important on the weekend, that's right there. And if I double click on this, go to the song metadata under extras, you can see here, there is my important information. I too am important. And that's shared between both aspects in G selector and in Zetta. And just very briefly, how do we make that connection on both? If I jump back to my G selector, if I go to tools and I go to global settings and I go to my user defined fields, remember, we have 99 user custom defined fields now in G selector. That includes text strings, dates, numbers, true or false, which is just a checkbox, yes, no, that type of thing. I also have important information here, right? So what I do is in Zetta, I go to config, system, I go to custom fields, important information. Now they have to match. That's very important. They have to match. So I would highlight this important information, probably copy it word for word, because, I did this once in one of my tests and I might have misspelled important by accident. And I was like, why is this not working? Oh, I forgot the T in important. So just a little rule advice. If you're doing it, copy and paste makes a lot more sense. Go back over to your G selector, make sure it's included in the fields. And then once again, boom, it's right there. If you have the typical G selector layout, that's going to be under your additional settings or your additional sub tab. You'll see it in the bottom left. But again, I want to show you some more advanced tips and tricks why you would do this. If it's important, bring it front and center, because that's the purpose of a field like important information. Makes sense? And again, put the field in there. It's available over here, over in Zetta under the extra tab. And then, of course, once we do that, now it's about interpreting your workflows. So going back to Anthony's point about grouping them together, going back to Richard's having his specialty show, if I go back to spots here, right? If you care about OUTCUEs, right click, insert, extra, OUTCUE, right down there. Boom. You can see here, I'm supposed to be a live spot. I have a little thing over here in the extra tab. This OUTCUE is rcsworks.com. I would say you can include voice on here, but most users kind of put sponsors at the voice or whatever it is. But you could put voice for your spots only and have like the voice is Nate, right? And know what that is. And then from there, I can just right click on here, do insert, and then do, let's see, asset, extra, OUTCUE. I'll save this layout here so I can move this over just a little bit. There we go. Thank you. There's my OUTCUE right there. And of course, just to show you, I'm going to put this in just like that. And you can see there's my OUTCUE for Nate in there as well. So you can see what that is, right? Oh, sorry. That's the what do you call it? It's the sponsorship in there. But you can see, you can kind of adjust that if you wanted to. So there's ways of doing that. If you wanted to move those around, again, if the field's important to you, include it in Zetta. If it's important to you in G selector, share it in G selector. If it's asset specific, organize it specifically to the asset if you wanted to, and include it in your layout and save it in your layout as well, right? And so let's see here. Oh, what do you see, Richard? Boom. I'm going to hit here. So it's easy for the people on air to switch the spot, airing, not having 3 spots in a row. Yeah, yes, exactly. So in that case, what Richard's saying is, now this should be part of your traffic director's job, but we all know things get moved around just a little bit. So let's pretend for a second that, hey, Richard was saying you have the Nate voice, the Nate voice, the Nate voice, and then a Richard voice. You could see that in the log here, move Richard in between, and now you have something like a Nate, Richard, and you can do that on the fly if you wanted to. Exactly. And again, going back to Anthony's point, if you wanted to, let's say, go back to my songs here, I can always filter and say, only show me songs that I'm important. And that would give you the subgrouping based on the overall asset type with a custom field to then subgroup from there. Because traffic's made from outside the station. Absolutely. Yep. 100%. I get it. So, in review, last call for questions here. I know there's a slight delay from me being live to seeing you over here. Any questions? Now it's time to ask those questions. Again, we're talking about custom fields and custom asset types. Both are available under configuration and system. There's asset types there, and there's custom fields over here. You don't need to restart the services. You do need to, majority of the time, they'll be there. I like a good log out and log back in. That's just me personally. But you should be able to change these on the fly, not having to log off. But again, you want to typically probably just to make things nice and clean, sign out of Zetta, sign back in. If you're in G Selector, it will automatically tell you have to restart the station cache. Nothing to worry about there either. No restarting the services on that end either. And yeah, super, super helpful. Great tool. Highly encourage you to customize your Zetta experience and share it over in G Selector if you can. Let's see, Anthony, can a custom field be two fields combined? You can do multiple values in a custom field, right? So you can essentially have, if I'm like important information, you can say yes, sure, something. I keep important information. It's very broad. I'm understanding that, but just so you know, you can do that. So if the event is, I'm reading your thing here, Anthony. Event is title, artist, and time. Event is title, artist, and time. The customer that is N plus H and J. For what purpose, Anthony? Anthony is essentially asking, so can a custom field be combined into two? And he's got like this, he's got a Game of Thrones theory throwing out where N plus H and J. I don't know if that reference lands, but that just cracked me up, Anthony. All I thought was Game of Thrones. I would say that you don't want to combine the field as much as you can combine the attribute or value inside of that field. Does that make sense? So it kind of really depends on what you're trying to do for the output here. So, I mean, you can always do like important information, and then we'll use sound code as kind of an example here, but obviously a custom sound code. So you can say it's pop, rock, dance. So it's three individual attributes inside of that one custom field. So you can always say it's like, artist, title, and like runtime, for example. And you would have one attribute is the artist. The next is runtime. The third is going to be the title. You can do it that way if you wanted to. But the way you're hinting at this, if you can combine custom fields like title, artist, and time, it sounds like you're trying to achieve something else, maybe with the RDS live metadata feed. Don't forget, there's multiple RDS feeds you can export throughout Zetta through different locations. So you're trying to get something to somewhere else, maybe perhaps duplicate your stream, your live metadata stream that's over here under the configuration system. You can have two different types of now playing exports for the same station. Maybe that's kind of what you're talking about here for purposes of what you're doing there. There's also variables here as well. So RCS support can totally help you with this, Anthony. If you're curious about how to do something with whatever, like I'm trying to achieve this, that's the best way to propose that question to support, is saying, I'm looking for this outcome. How can I get there? Right. And they'll help you out too, because if you're looking to have one field that includes title, artist, and runtime, that screams to me that there's something more that you're trying to ask there. And maybe custom fields is not the right section, but we can definitely help you out and get you where you need to be. Hope that makes sense over there too. Last call for questions here. You guys have been phenomenal today with these questions. Let me see here. Checking my chat over on Facebook. Let's see. Khalid, you good? Everything good over there? AJ, you good? Ajay, I'm sorry if I'm doing an awful job there as well. Mark, everything good over there in St. Louis? If it is, thanks. Perfect. Great. And reach out, Anthony, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And Richard, I did see you. I'll poke you on DM there on Facebook. We'll chat a little bit about that. And again, custom asset types, custom fields, utilize them, incorporate them in your everyday workflow. And in case I wasn't very clear for the Richard example, if I have a custom field in the songs, like important information, I can always filter by all of those special Richard songs by incorporating that into Richard's format. and searching by those elements, including the filter too, by the way. I am important, right? Something like that. Don't forget, you can use that field if you wanted to, right? Awesome. Hey, listen, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it. As always, we'll be here every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Don't forget the archive over at rcsworks.com. If anything you see here, like maybe perhaps G Selector's custom song link window, you want to include that on your end right now. We're accepting beta users as we speak. Reach out to your local RCS contact. We'll put you in touch there, and we'll hook you up over there too. Hey, Kai, you got in just last minute. I did see you there, Kai. Hey, thank you for checking in. I appreciate it. And I'll see you guys next Thursday, 11 a.m. For another RCS Live. A fantastic day. Bye.